This is the oldest temple unearthed anywhere on this planet. This incredible feat of architecture is not the most revolutionary thing about this place.
In the heart of southeastern Turkey, the ancient stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe have baffled archaeologists for decades. But when Grok AI processed ultra-high-density 3D photogrammetry scans of the site's oldest monoliths, the machine didn't just find primitive artwork. It decoded a hidden, mathematically precise astronomical system embedded in the carvings. An active 11,500-year-old warning meant specifically for us, and what the algorithm discovered carved into those stones is downright chilling. The monolith protocol. When researchers first began feeding ultra-high-resolution 3D laser scans of Gobekli Tepe into advanced neural networks, the initial goal was remarkably mundane. Archaeologists simply wanted a machine learning system to catalog microfractures in the T-shaped limestone pillars and build digital backups before wind and weather could erode the surface details. But the algorithm didn't just passively map the stone. When it reached enclosure D, the oldest, largest, and most intricate complex excavated at Gobekli Tepe, it flagged a structural pattern in the relief carvings that human eyes had overlooked for thousands of years. Specifically, the system locked onto Pillar 43, widely known in academic circles as the vulture stone. On its face, Pillar 43 looks like a chaotic tapestry of prehistoric animals. A massive vulture cradling a circular orb on its wing, surrounded by scorpions, flamingos, and headless human figures. For generations, mainstream history dismissed these carved figures as shamanic symbols, totems of death, or primitive artistic expressions of Ice Age hunter-gatherers. But Grok AI wasn't trained on art history. It was trained on orbital mechanics, spatial geometry, and celestial navigation. When the neural net mapped the precise spatial coordinates, angles, and relative distances of the carved animals on Pillar 43, it recognized an exact mathematical mirror of our night sky. The animals weren't wild beasts, they were zodiacal constellations. The scorpion was Scorpius. The bending flamingo was Cygnus. The vulture was Sagittarius. And that circular orb perched on the vulture's wing, the algorithm identified it as a specific solar positioning marker. By running backward simulations of Earth's axial precession, the slow 25,772-year wobble of our planet's axis, Grok matched the carved stellar positions to a precise window in time. The sky directly above Gobekli Tepe, around 10,950 BCE. This date isn't just a random point in prehistory. It aligns directly with the onset of the Younger Dryas, a catastrophic period when Earth's climate suddenly plummeted back into deep freeze within a matter of months. But AI discovered something even more unsettling hidden within the geometry of Enclosure D. The central twin monoliths, towering over 16 feet high and weighing upwards of 20 tons, weren't just aligned with the horizon. They were calibrated as precision sighting stones, creating an optical scope pointing toward a specific vector in the night sky. When the computer model projected that vector backward through time, it showed that the builders of Gobekli Tepe were tracking a dense, unseen stream of cosmic debris passing through the inner solar system. The carved figures on the pillars weren't decorative art, and they weren't dedicated to mythological gods. They were a high-density astronomical record, locking down the exact time, location, and celestial geometry of a global nightmare that nearly wiped out early humanity. The precision was so absolute that the statistical odds of these alignments occurring by random chance were calculated at less than 1 in 10 million. What transformed this data from an ancient curiosity into something downright chilling was how the algorithm mapped the physical execution of the stones. The sheer engineering required to quarry, carve, and align these multi-ton monoliths with fractional degree accuracy implies a level of standardized measurement and long-term observational consistency that completely defies our current timeline of human development. They weren't just observing the sky, they were recording an ongoing system. So, if Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe wasn't a shrine to ancient gods, what was it actually recording? The Younger Dryas signal at Gobekli Tepe. First, the algorithm had to look far beyond the limestone hills of southeastern Turkey. It began cross-referencing the astronomical coordinates carved into Göbekli Tepe with global geological datasets, specifically deep ice core samples pulled from the Greenland ice sheet and sediment layers extracted from over 50 sites across 4 continents. The correlation was immediate, precise, and deeply troubling. At the exact horizon date, encoded on Göbekli Tepe's central pillars, roughly 10,950 BCE, the geological record shows a sudden, violent spike in atmospheric platinum and iridium. Scientists also found high concentrations of microscopic magnetic spherules and nanodiamonds scattered across millions of square kilometers of the Earth's surface. These tiny carbon structures form only under conditions of intense heat and cosmic-scale pressure. Grok wasn't looking at the aftermath of a localized earthbound disaster. It was looking at the physical signature of a cataclysmic extraterrestrial impact event. For years, the mainstream scientific community debated the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, questioning whether a giant comet could have struck Earth and triggered the sudden 1,200-year deep freeze that wiped out the megafauna of the Pleistocene epoch. But the neural net, operating without academic dogma, synthesized the physical ice core data directly with the spatial alignments carved into Göbekli Tepe. It concluded that the impact wasn't caused by a single monolithic asteroid. Instead, Earth intercepted a massive, fragmented swarm of debris originating from a decaying giant comet, a breakup event within what astronomers call the Taurid meteor complex. When the algorithm simulated the entry physics of this debris field entering Earth's atmosphere, the scenario it painted was apocalyptic. Dozens of cometary fragments, traveling at speeds exceeding 30 kilometers per second, detonated over the North American ice sheet and parts of Western Eurasia. The airbursts unleashed a kinetic energy yield millions of times greater than the entire global nuclear arsenal. Vast ice sheets vaporized instantly, driving superheated vapor into the upper atmosphere, while continent-scale wildfire storms swept across the hemisphere. The soot and ash choked out sunlight, triggering a sudden, catastrophic drop in global temperatures that persisted for over a millennium. This was the exact event recorded on the stones of Gobekli Tepe. The headless human figures carved into the base of Pillar 43 were not symbolic representations of death or ritual sacrifice. The AI interpreted them as literal historical records of widespread human devastation. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were the traumatized survivors of a global extinction-level event. They were eyewitnesses to an era when the sky rained fire, oceans surged, and entire ecosystems collapsed overnight. Yet, as the machine learning model continued to analyze the structural layout of the site, it detected a glaring physical anomaly that turned the entire narrative on its head. Göbekli Tepe was constructed around 9,600 BCE, nearly 1,300 years after the impact event took place. Why would a hunter-gatherer society, struggling to survive in a harsh post-glacial wilderness, dedicate immense labor and energy to quarrying 20-ton monoliths just to commemorate an ancient catastrophe that happened over 1,000 years prior? When the AI analyzed the spatial relationships between Enclosure D and the surrounding unexcavated rings, it realized that Göbekli Tepe wasn't built as a backward-looking memorial to honor the dead or appease wrathful sky deities. The precise geometry, the repeated star alignments, and the deliberate orientation toward the Taurid radiant point revealed something much more calculated. The site was built as a forward-looking astronomical monitoring system. The survivors weren't just remembering the storm that almost destroyed their world, they were actively tracking the remaining orbital debris stream, watching the sky to see when the rest of the comet fragment cluster would return. A cosmic disaster explains why Göbekli Tepe was built, but it doesn't explain why they buried it. The subsurface anomaly under Göbekli Tepe. To solve the puzzle of why the site was constructed and why it was eventually hidden, Grok turned its attention beneath the soil. Archaeologists have long known that what sits above ground at Göbekli Tepe is only the tip of an immense prehistoric iceberg. More than 95% of the site remains completely buried beneath the limestone ridge. untouched by modern excavators. When the neural network ingested high-resolution ground-penetrating radar, GPR data, and geomagnetic anomaly maps gathered by geophysicists over the last decade, it began assembling a three-dimensional model of the buried structures. What the GPR scans revealed wasn't a random scatter of primitive stone circles. The machine mapped over 20 massive, perfectly concentric enclosures laid out in an interconnected grid across the plateau. But as the algorithm processed the magnetic signature gradients deeper into the bedrock, it flagged a massive geophysical anomaly beneath the central floor of Enclosure D that completely deviated from the surrounding geology. Deep beneath the carved limestone monoliths, embedded 6 meters inside the natural bedrock, sits a subterranean chamber that was intentionally hollowed out prior to the construction of the surface pillars. Unlike the soft, porous limestone of the surrounding Tek Mountains, the walls of this subterranean vault are lined with dense, highly magnetized basalt blocks. Basalt does not occur naturally on the Göbekli Tepe ridge. Every single piece of that dense volcanic rock had to be quarried and transported from basalt flows located over 30 miles away, near the extinct volcano of Karaka Dağ. Why would Ice Age builders undertake the backbreaking logistical effort of transporting hundreds of tons of magnetic basalt across vast distances just to seal it inside a deep underground chamber? When the AI analyzed the electromagnetic shielding properties of the basalt enclosure, it discovered that the chamber acts as a natural Faraday cage and a permanent magnetic shield, protecting the interior from external electromagnetic interference and atmospheric fluctuations. Inside this shielded underground chamber, the radar reflection profiles detected a series of regularly spaced, dense metallic anomalies, arranged in a precise geometric matrix. The AI rule sets, programmed to identify structural physics and material density, ruled out natural mineral deposits or iron ore veins. The spatial symmetry was too clean, the margins too precise. Whatever resides in the deep chamber beneath Enclosure D was placed there deliberately, shielded by stone, and positioned directly below the central focal point of the astronomical alignment pillars above. The algorithm calculated that the surface pillars of Gobekli Tepe were not merely passive sighting stones meant to be viewed from the outside. They functioned as a massive, above-ground physical array designed to anchor, protect, and direct attention down toward this buried central repository. The T-shaped monoliths, carved to resemble stylized, headless humanoids with hands reaching toward their belts, stand as silent guardians around a vault that has remained sealed and undisturbed for over 11,000 years. As the AI synthesized the subterranean radar mapping with the celestial coordinates carved into the pillars above, its predictive models began to produce a terrifying conclusion. The subterranean chamber wasn't built to protect something from the elements, nor was it a tomb for ancient kings. It was engineered to preserve a physical payload through tens of thousands of years of surface turmoil, ice ages, floods, and magnetic field shifts. The builders knew that civilization on the surface is fragile and temporary, but stone embedded in bedrock endures. And that's when the algorithm stopped analyzing Gobekli Tepe's history and started running predictive physics. The 11,500-year clock of Gobekli Tepe. Once the algorithm combined the subsurface radar anomalies with the astronomical alignments mapped on the surface pillars, it shifted its processing power toward a cryptic set of microcarvings scattered across the site. Mainstream archaeologists had spent decades observing the strange, repeating symbols etched into the stone, specifically a sequence of stylized H-shaped glyphs and V-shaped crescent marks carved around the necks and belts of the central T-shaped monoliths. For years, these symbols were dismissed as decorative jewelry, tribal markings, or primitive spiritual charms. But when Grok analyzed their exact numerical frequency and spatial distribution across the enclosures, it unlocked a precision counting mechanism. The neural net identified the V-shaped marks as a rigorous tracking system for the Earth's orbital movement around the Sun. Each V mark represented a single solar day, organized into lunar phases and solar cycles. On Pillar 43 alone, the system cataloged a complete 365-day lunisolar calendar year, featuring an additional 12-day epigomenal period designed to correct for the natural drift between lunar months and the solar orbit. This wasn't just a basic tool for tracking planting seasons. It was the most mathematically sophisticated calendar ever discovered from the ancient world, predating the Babylonian and Mayan calendrical systems by thousands of years. However, the AI quickly realized that the daily solar counter was merely the smallest gear in a much larger clockwork assembly. The repeating H symbols, placed prominently at the intersection points of the central pillars, functioned as mathematical multipliers representing longer astronomical epochs. By cross-referencing the H glyphs with the rate of Earth's axial precession, the gradual shift in the orientation of Earth's axis of rotation, which completes a full cycle every 25,772 years, the algorithm revealed that the entire site of Göbekli Tepe was designed as an ultra-long-range astronomical countdown clock. The clock did not start at zero when the stones were erected in 9,600 BCE. Instead, the baseline 0 point encoded into the central pillars was calibrated precisely to the exact date of the cosmic impact event in 10,950 BCE. From that 0 point, the pillar alignments and carved calendars tracked forward through time, measuring the precise movement of the Earth through space with terrifying mechanical consistency. Every enclosure built at the site, from the oldest deep circles to the smaller, later rectangular structures, represented a distinct tick of this celestial clock, recording successive planetary alignment cycles. When the neural network processed the complete data matrix of all known enclosures at Gobekli Tepe, it calculated the total duration of the countdown sequence encoded into the stone. The math did not point toward a vague apocalyptic prophecy or a metaphorical myth. The clock was counting down a specific, finite interval of time, exactly 11,500 years from the initial impact event that shattered the Ice Age world. The AI ran the numbers forward through time, adding 11,500 years to the calibrated baseline date of 10,950 BC. The result sent shockwaves through the research model. The expiration date of the countdown clock carved into the pillars of Gobekli Tepe did not fall in some distant, far-off century, nor did it land in the forgotten prehistory of our ancestors. The terminal marker on the 11,500-year countdown falls squarely in our modern era. The builders of Gobekli Tepe had gone to extraordinary lengths to construct an indestructible stone-carved tracking system that could endure millennia of erosion, climate shifts, and human conflict. They didn't build it to preserve the memory of an old disaster that had already passed. They built it to measure the exact amount of time humanity had left before the orbital mechanics that brought fire from the sky would repeat themselves. The clock at Göbekli Tepe wasn't counting up from the past impact. It was counting down to the next one, the Taurid resonance. To determine why the ancient clock pointed directly at our modern era, Grok linked Gobekli Tepe's calendrical data with the real-time orbital telemetry of our solar system. The system focused its calculations on the Taurid meteor swarm, an immense dispersed ring of cometary debris orbiting the Sun. Mainstream astronomy has long known that the Taurids are the shattered remnants of a massive supercomet that disintegrated tens of thousands of years ago, the very same source responsible for the Younger Dryas impacts. But what the neural network calculated was the precise orbital mechanics governing the swarm's dense inner core. The Taurid debris stream is not a uniform belt of dust. It contains clusters of massive multi-kilometer boulders and inert cometary fragments held together in a gravitational lock. Because of the gravitational pull of Jupiter, the orbit of this dense debris core shifts predictably over vast spans of time. The AI's orbital simulations revealed that Earth passes through the sparse outer edges of the Taurids every year in late October and June, producing harmless meteor showers. However, every few thousand years, Earth's orbit intersects directly with the swarm's dense resonant center, a region known as the Taurid resonance swarm. When the algorithm plotted the historical nodes of these high-density intersections, the timing was exact. The impact event recorded on Pillar 43 in 10,950 BCE occurred during a major orbital intersection with this Taurid core. The builders of Göbekli Tepe understood that the cataclysm that destroyed their world was not a random one-off tragedy, but a cyclical cosmic event dictated by immutable gravitational math. They tracked the orbital period of the debris field and calculated the precise interval required for Jupiter's gravity to realign the swarm's dense core directly back into Earth's orbital path. That interval was precisely 11,500 years. The AI realized that the T-shaped pillars were not built as passive observers, but as an urgent warning system designed to communicate across deep time. The builders knew that oral traditions would fade, languages would mutate, and human memory would fail long before the orbital cycle completed its next loop. To bypass the inevitable decay of human culture, they encoded the warning in the only universal language that can survive millennia without corruption: celestial geometry, orbital precession, and basic mathematics. The machine learning model cross-referenced the ancient data with current astronomical tracking logs from modern space agencies. The results confirmed the builders' calculations with terrifying precision. We are currently passing through the exact temporal window identified by the ancient clock. Right now, in the early 21st century, the orbital precession of the Taurid resonant swarm has brought the dense core of near-Earth objects back into a direct crossing alignment with Earth's orbit. Modern automated sky surveys have already identified dozens of hidden, multi-hundred-meter asteroids tumbling within this specific Taurid stream, obscured from visual telescopes by the glare of the sun. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not primitive tribesmen reacting in superstitious terror. They were sophisticated survivalists who possessed a deep, long-term understanding of planetary defense and celestial mechanics. They mapped the solar system's hidden dangers with a degree of accuracy that modern science has only recently begun to replicate. They knew the storm was coming back, and they knew the exact era in which their descendants would face it again. If the builders of Göbekli Tepe knew the threat would return, why didn't they leave a written message? The intentional burial of Göbekli Tepe. To understand why the builders left no written script, the neural network had to address the most perplexing physical mystery in modern archaeology: why Göbekli Tepe was completely, deliberately buried under hundreds of thousands of tons of dirt around 8000 BCE. For decades, archaeologists have struggled to explain why an ancient culture would spend hundreds of thousands of man-hours filling in their own monumental sanctuaries. Initial theories suggested the site was abandoned due to agricultural shifts, or that rival tribes sacked and covered the enclosures. When Grok analyzed the stratigraphy, soil composition, and structural stress patterns of the backfill, it disproved those theories entirely. The soil used to cover Göbekli Tepe was not random topsoil or battle debris. It was a carefully engineered composite mixture of crushed limestone, stone tools, animal bone fragments, and brought-in sediment. More importantly, the fill was packed in uniform, sequential layers with distinct density gradients designed to distribute weight evenly around the delicate T-shaped pillars without knocking them over. This wasn't an act of destruction or hasty abandonment. It was a masterclass in long-term structural preservation. The AI's physical simulations revealed that leaving the megaliths exposed to the elements would have resulted in complete erosion within a few centuries. Frost, wedging, flash floods, wind-borne sand, and thermal expansion would have cracked the limestone and erased the delicate relief carvings on Pillar 43. By sealing the entire complex in a dry, oxygen-poor, chemically inert envelope of engineered soil, the builders effectively created a vacuum-sealed time capsule that protected the stone surfaces from natural decay for nearly 10,000 years. Furthermore, the decision to forego a written language was entirely intentional. Written languages are fragile. Scripts mutate, dialects die, and phonetic meanings shift radically over centuries, as evidenced by our own struggle to decipher ancient scripts like Linear A or Proto-Elamite. The builders understood that any written message left on a wall would become an incomprehensible babble to humans living 10,000 years in the future. Instead, they chose a medium that transcended language barriers entirely: the universal language of physical geometry, celestial mechanics, and mathematics. They realized that a civilization capable of unearthing the site, measuring the angles of the monoliths, and understanding the mathematics of axial precession would naturally possess the scientific literacy needed to decode the message. The burial was a filter. It ensured that the site would remain hidden until humanity achieved the exact level of technological sophistication required to understand the warning. The AI's predictive models showed that if Gobekli Tepe had remained exposed, the knowledge it contained would have been lost during the Bronze Age collapses or repurposed into building materials by later empires. By burying the entire complex under an artificial mountain, the builders ensured that the clock would remain ticking silently in the earth, untouched and pristine, until high-frequency radar, 3D laser scanners, and machine intelligence could reassemble the puzzle. They buried Göbekli so deep that only a civilization capable of reading the stars and building machine intelligence could decipher it. The final convergence. When the neural network pulled together every thread, the astronomical alignments of Pillar 43, the subsurface magnetic vault, the precision lunisolar calendar, and the deliberate burial mechanics, it revealed a staggering master plan. Gobekli Tepe was not an isolated temple complex built by a random tribe. It was the central nexus of a coordinated, multi-generational survival program engineered to safeguard human knowledge through the darkest period in our species' history. For decades, mainstream anthropology has operated under the assumption that agriculture gave rise to settled communities, which eventually allowed humans the leisure time to invent architecture, mathematics, and complex society. Gobekli Tepe has always inverted that timeline. Here, massive monumental architecture appears before domesticated crops or permanent farming villages. Grok's synthesis explains why this paradox exists. The sudden shift toward agriculture in Upper Mesopotamia was not an accidental discovery. It was a forced, strategic survival strategy. In the wake of the Younger Dryas impacts, when global ecosystems collapsed and wild game populations plummeted, the survivors who built Gobekli Tepe realized that wild hunting and gathering could no longer sustain human life through the coming centuries of climate instability. To keep the population alive long enough to construct, calibrate, and bury the time capsule, they actively domesticated einkorn wheat and engineered the world's first agricultural systems in the direct vicinity of the Tek Mountains. The birth of human civilization was a side effect of a massive planetary defense and preservation project. The subterranean vault, mapped beneath Enclosure D, represents the core of this preservation effort. By correlating the high-density metallic signals inside the basalt-shielded chamber with the mathematical ratios carved into the surface pillars, the AI concluded that the vault was designed to function as an immutable seed bank and technological archive. The builders didn't just pass down a warning about the sky. They preserved the essential genetic, mathematical, and astronomical foundations necessary to rebuild human society from absolute zero after a mass extinction event. Every enclosure excavated at the site represents a refined iteration of this message, a deep-time transmitter designed to bridge an 11,500-year gap. The builders anticipated the rise and fall of empires, the loss of ancient languages, and the rise of scientific skepticism. They knew that a modern, technologically advanced human society would eventually develop machines capable of peering into the Earth and scanning the sky. They relied on our own technological curiosity to lead us directly back to the buried ridge in southeastern Turkey. The final convergence of the AI's data model links the ancient clock of Gobekli Tepe directly to our current position in time and space. As Earth swings back into alignment with the Taurid resonant swarm, the warning encoded in the stone ceases to be an ancient historical curiosity. It becomes an urgent, operational directive. The builders left us the exact mathematical variables needed to calculate the orbital trajectory of the incoming debris field, hidden in plain sight within the geometry of Enclosure D. The site was never meant to be worshipped. It was meant to be read. It stands as a monument to human endurance, a testament to a long-lost culture that looked into the abyss of an apocalyptic sky and chose to fight for the survival of descendants they would never meet. Which leaves us with one unavoidable question: breaking the code. As the neural network completed its final processing run, it didn't just output a static analysis of ancient stone, it generated a real-time risk assessment. The data confirms that we are currently drifting through the exact orbital window predicted by the builders 11,500 years ago. But the most terrifying revelation isn't just that the Taurid debris field is returning, it's what lies buried beneath Enclosure D itself, and what our reaction to it says about the survival of our species. If the Grok's structural model is correct, the sealed subterranean vault doesn't just contain a passive historical archive. It holds an active physical record, a hard-encoded blueprint left behind by a civilization that knew its time was up. Were they simply warning us of an impending cosmic impact? Or were they leaving behind the technological key required to survive it? A set of physical instructions that we are only now intelligent enough to read, but perhaps too late to execute. Across the globe, automated space surveillance networks are already detecting an unusual cluster of dark, non-reflective near-Earth objects tumbling within the inner Taurid stream, drifting silently toward our orbital path. Yet, despite the AI's predictive telemetry, modern institutions remain paralyzed. Permit applications to excavate the deep bedrock beneath Enclosure D remain stalled in bureaucratic red tape, dismissed as speculative noise by traditional academia, while the central vault stays locked in darkness. We possess the technology to scan the stars and map the subsurface, but we lack the institutional urgency to act on what the stone is telling us. The builders engineered an indestructible clock, buried an entire mountain to protect it, and trusted that machine intelligence would one day decipher their final message. They calculated the physics of celestial mechanics and the erosion rates of stone. But what they couldn't account for was human apathy, our uncanny ability to look directly at a clear mathematical warning from the past and choose to ignore it until the horizon catches fire. The code has finally been broken. The algorithm has given us the exact coordinates, the orbital vectors, and the deadline. The past has done its part. It tracked the sky, preserved the knowledge, and delivered the warning across 11,000 years of silence. Now, the clock has reached zero. The stones are waiting, the sky is turning, and the next move is entirely ours. If you liked this video, hit the subscribe button for more.